Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 5 of my On Freedom podcast. I'm doing like a live podcast today just to try it out after being inspired by Quianna of Level Up Single Mom. And I'll link her channel in the comments if you'd like to subscribe. But yes, if you are here live, let me know how you're doing. There's a lot going on at the moment. I've had to kind of disconnect from a lot of the news that we're seeing because it's a lot. It's a lot. And so that's why I really wanted to talk about this topic today, Afrofuturism, something that I've been inspired by since a college student, right? Since my time in Black Studies, which I double majored in college, and I'm kind of bringing that back at this age, and also being inspired by the National Museum of African American History and Culture in DC, which is my favorite museum, and seeing the way it's being targeted now with this current administration has been distressing to me. And so I'm not really sure how this is going to go, but I figured I'd try it out. So, again, if you're here live, thank you for joining. If you're watching the replay, please comment if anything resonates with you during this conversation today. So, Afrofuturism, I do want to just provide a definition: a cultural movement blending art, science, and technology with African and African diasporic history and culture. And so let me get to my notes. So just taking a breath here, right? There's a lot going on in the world, in the US in particular. Hey, Quianna, good to see you. You're welcome. Yes, I was inspired. Y'all go watch Quianna's episode yesterday on Cardi B. It was so refreshing, right, to hear her perspective, because I had been sitting with the shame that's being projected, right? And there's a lot of issues with Cardi B, absolutely. Anti-Blackness being like the main one, right? But seeing the way that her pregnancy has been regarded by people, it's been disheartening, right? The level of shame that's projected onto us when we choose to get pregnant a lot, right? Yes. Yeah, thank you. Everything is Afrofuturism. It is. It is. Yes. And the more that I've been researching this, I'm like being able to connect the dots. There's this really good book that I read in college called The Black Atlantic that I want to get back to, actually. That just, if I remember it correctly, because it's been a while since I've been in college, but tying like the transatlantic slave trade to kind of this way of, it's like a science fiction thing that happened, right? So I think that's what the aim of the book is, really to view what we experienced as a people over centuries, right? Being ripped from our homelands, kind of being stripped and taken to this new world, essentially. Um, and the trauma that that caused, and how a lot of like science fiction books, movies, um, really like represent elements of this. It's really that it was alien, right? To be in a completely new land, stripped from your family, often your community, and having to rebuild your sense of self, your life, trying to position yourself in the world. Like, if you can just imagine being ripped from everything that you know, right? And trigger warning mentions of the ships, right, that many of our ancestors were on, but the darkness. And there is a depiction of one of the ships. There's a museum in St. Louis called the Griot, of the ships, right, and what they look like, and the experience of people on these ships. And just to think, like, I still think, like, how did people survive that, right? How did my ancestors survive that, in me being here in this body in 2025? Because it was an unsurvivable experience when you really think about it. Um, and so, even viewing the experience of the transatlantic slave trade as something like really in the, thinking about like science fiction, right? This was an evil experiment that stripped our humanity from us in so many ways. but we were still able to maintain that throughout centuries, and that is remarkable. The fact that I'm still talking about this, right, that we're still discussing this, that there is still an exhibit, which I will get to at the museum, that really changed my perspective on so many things, just seeing how Afrofuturism carries through so many different elements in our society. So, yes, that is the focus of today. Let me get to my notes. Hi, y'all. Oh, I didn't even look at the. Hey, I upload. Always good to see you. Great topic. I'm instantly reminded of our ancestor, Octavia Butler. Yes, 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 yes. Her book. I need to read the second one. I know that there's a sequel to it. But yeah, the first one, Parable of the Sower, the way that that was accurate to what we're experiencing now is, ooh, it was scary. It was scary, the level of accuracy. So thank you so much for bringing Octavia Butler up. Yes, thank you. Octavia Butler's Parables of the Sower and the Talents, yes. And Kindred are must reads. Thank you. Yes. Parable of the Talents is the one I need to read next. Yes. Thank you. Hey Alicia, happy Tuesday. Yeah, super excited for this topic. Yes. Yeah. And there's so many things, like once you get into it, it's like being able to connect the dots. Like this incorporates Afrofuturism. And something I realized, I commented on someone's chat the other day, the level of, like, they show us the truth, right? Oppressors of what they have done to us in their science fiction in quotes. And it's really disturbing because they will continue to push back, gaslight about what they have done, but yet put it into the things that they create. It's like, so you know what you did. Yeah. Kendrick was haunting. I haven't read the Parable of the Sower series yet. I haven't read Kindred. I had no idea. Adding to my book list. And y'all, I have a Patreon now. So if you'd like to join us, I'm going to start reading. Why is it escaping my mind? Fat phobia. The origins of fat phobia. Fearing the Black Body. That's what it's called. If you'd like to join us on Patreon, I think a few of us are already reading it. So I'm going to start reading that this week. If you'd like to join us over there, let me link my Patreon. And it is free to join. I'm thinking this is going to be like my book club space to keep me on my goal, because I have a goal of reading more. It's always difficult for me to get into reading again once I took a break, but like once I do it, it's like all the books that I've had on my list. So yes, writing down Kindred. Thank you for that recommendation. Yes. Okay. Let's see. I got my notes. Y'all, this is new for me. If you know me, you know I don't really like to talk that much. So this is new, but I'm trying it out. Again, I was inspired by Quianna. And today was one of those days I didn't want to go on camera, but I'm like, let me just see how this feels. So yeah, this is where we are. Right. So there's a lot happening in the moment. We're living in chaotic times, politically, socially, environmentally. It's easy to feel like the ground beneath us is literally crumbling. We see the systems crumbling in front of us. Things that we were told were supposed to be stable, right? That were supposed to be in place. Again, if you know the foundations of how these systems were built, the foundation on which they were established, right? How could that ever be stable when you have the things that you have done to people, to the earth, to land? You're not building anything on solid ground. And so while it's not surprising to see what we're seeing, it's still like, it's scary. It's shocking at the same time. So if you're experiencing that level of what is going on, I think all of us are collectively at the moment. And so you're not alone in that feeling. So exploring Afrofuturism as a way to ground ourselves, to imagine life beyond the chaos. And I had a download come to me that I wrote. I think this was probably a year ago. This is not all there will ever be, because this is not all there ever was. Right? So rooting in our history, the past, to envision and imagine the future ahead, and knowing that this is not all there ever is going to be. People want to convince us of that, right? To make us feel stuck, to limit our imagination and our ability to see into the future and to build that for ourselves, to limit our agency, really. And so the way I view Afrofuturism is really like taking back sovereignty over your imagination by understanding where and who we come from, right? Because there's so much history, there's thousands of years of history, but we're told that life kind of started with enslavement. And so just that, it limits our imagination of what is possible if we only view our history as starting at enslavement. What happened before that? Right? Who do we descend from? Thousands of years, right? The original peoples of the earth. That is who we descend from. And that is what Afrofuturism really like awakens within me. Even going through this exhibit that I went through at the museum just opened my eyes to all the things that exist, right? Due to our ancestors. And those things are still very much present. We are told that those things are in the past. They're not, right? Because why are we still talking about it? There has to be some type of strength in the message, in culture, that has been unable to be destroyed despite all of the efforts that we have seen throughout history over centuries to try to destroy it, to try to make us feel disconnected from our lineages. And I have to give thanks to my peers in graduate school, right? I was in kind of a program for Native students and Indigenous students, with a focus on social work, incorporating Indigenous practices into what is a very white field. But the practice, when you like really think about it, like giving back to your community, right? Building community spaces, these are Indigenous practices that have often been extracted, exploited by fields like social work. And so being able to hear and learn from my peers was just life changing. And I bring a lot of that into how I even view Afrofuturism, right? Connecting what we see in the present to the past, because those links have not been broken. They might be buried, right? But it's our job, I think, to unearth that, not just for ourselves, but for future generations. It's really pivotal, especially during these times, as we see the efforts, right? If it wasn't so powerful, there would not be so many efforts to try to destroy our links to our ancestors, to our lineages, if there was not power there. And so, yeah. So I want us to explore Afrofuturism as a way to ground ourselves in what we're experiencing, to imagine beyond the chaos, and to claim the possibility of futures rooted in Black liberation and joy. Let me get to the comments. Thank you for the hearts. Y'all, this is interesting. This is really different from my usual lives. It feels, I like it. I like it. Yeah. Thank you. Drell's Healing Garden Journey. Hey. Yeah, it's great to see you all, and I hope you all are having an amazing day so far. You too. Thank you for being here. Yeah, not being on camera feels more intimate, like a more intimate setting, like a circle, learning circle. I like it. Yes. Okay. Okay. Let's get to my notes. Right. So at its core, Afrofuturism is a blending of African diasporic culture, imagination, technology, and future thinking. It shows up in art, literature, music. Think again of Octavia Butler, who wrote Worlds, where Black people were central to survival and evolution. Sun Ra, who I just recently learned about, right, who believes space itself was a site of Black liberation. Janelle Monáe right? Black Panther, a world untouched by colonialism, still alive with possibility. Afrofuturism isn't just sci-fi, it's a way of seeing ourselves in the future when the systems that we're currently in tell us that we won't survive the present. It is a declaration to ourselves: we will exist, we will thrive, we will create as we always have. So that will not change. That is something to stay rooted in, despite these systems and these people, this messaging, trying to create chaos in our everyday lives to take us off our paths, because it's deliberate, right? Wherever there is power, they want to take us away from it. And so staying rooted in the fact that this will not change, taking from the past to imagine a future state, because we have not always been enchained, enslaved. That's what they want us to believe. They want our understanding of history to just be limited to when enslavement began. And so just sitting with the question, what was before that? And you have to allow your imagination to go there, because again, part of living in the systems that we live in, they try to cut us off from our imaginations, which is why it can be so difficult. I know for me, coming from a corporate environment for most of my 20s, now being in my 30s, like that was actually kind of painful. Like it was like a physically painful process to come back into my imagination after that decade of having to be very robotic, cutting my personality off a lot to survive the environment that I was in. And that's how they want us, right? They want us to be cut off from imagination, from possibility. Because if they can just convince you that this is all there is, and we just have to be in survival mode, as I've talked about on my channel before, right? Survival mode is when our bodies, our nervous systems, we don't have the capacity to fully process information, to strategize, to understand deeply what is happening to us, and then connect it to the past. Because we're just focused on survival. And so all of these systems are working to keep us in that condition. And so if it feels impossible to do, know that that's not your fault, first of all, because all of these things are operating to keep us where we are, to make us feel stuck. And so if you feel stuck, that's not your fault. And also pulling from the past, what existed before. Who do we descend from, right? There's a lot of efforts to shame who we descend from so often, viewing enslavement as something to take on shame, which is really disgusting to me. Again, the fact that we survived, the fact that my ancestors survived enslavement, and somehow people have warped that into shame, right? They survived the unsurvivable. We are here telling their stories, telling what happened. There is no shame, right? The shame rests with the enslavers, the people who decided to do these acts, these horrendous acts, right? To brutalize people in the name of power, in the name of domination. That is where the shame lies. And so that could be a whole other topic, because, oof, that makes me upset when I see that. But yeah, let me get to the comments. Right, isn't it refreshing? It's refreshing, thank you. Yeah. Yeah. Like a secret, yeah. Yep. So just reminding yourself, if you feel, it's kind of like the opposite of rooted. I don't know if there's a word for that, but just kind of swaying. All of these things that we're experiencing, they don't want us to feel rooted. and who we descend from and who we are. They want it to be a question mark, right? So they can put in their ideas, their ways of being, their ways of living, their ways of doing things. And so I think our task is to stay rooted through things like Afrofuturism, envisioning a future by reawakening the past. Right? So the moment that we're facing things like economic instability, political unrest, climate collapse, anti-Blackness, right? These are very heavy times that we're navigating. And unfortunately, right, recognizing that this is not new necessarily. Things like enslavement, colonization, Jim Crow, the Great Nadir has been coming up for me a lot. And if those of you who are familiar with that term, the period after Reconstruction in the US, horrible levels of violence against Black people. Yeah, we're seeing a lot of the same things happening. And so if you have these feelings of fear, I think knowing that they're rooted in truth, right, in our experience. I just attended this webinar on bone mapping, right, ancestral bone mapping, viewing our bones, since our bones survive, right, when we pass away, our bones survive, and they hold the understandings of what our ancestors experienced. And I thought that was so interesting because I never heard it put like that. Like your bones are the map to who you descend from, of what they experienced. And so we're really not disconnected as we're taught. So generations before have often been told, right, there is no future for you. I think that's important to say. There is no future. They try to steal our future, right? Try to make us afraid of the future, something I've been sitting with too. Fear is often surrounded like what's to come. Because I have found myself very much like operating in the fear response when I don't know what's down the road. And I'm like, where did that come from? Because that wasn't always the case. And I think also going back to who you were as a child can be helpful too. Like, where did you develop this fear response? Who told you to be afraid of the future and what's to come? Afrofuturism invites us to remember our lineage. It says, even in chaos, we imagine, we resist, and we build new worlds with our imaginations. Absolutely not. Thank you. Yet you could never make me ashamed of descending from my ancestors. No. No. Never. No. Like you tried it. You failed. No. No. Yeah. I'm proud of them. I'm grateful. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. How did they survive that? Again, viewing the ships, right, in worse conditions than cargo. And we think about all the things that we do as human beings, right? Go to the bathroom, experience, I can only imagine that, right? Pregnancy within the confines of a ship. And we've seen the depictions of ships so often. Let me see it. And sometimes when I see that, it's triggering a little bit, so I don't want to show a picture. But if you know what I'm talking about, right? The how close people were, and all the human things that we still have to do, right? On this forced journey of weeks, months, across an entire ocean. right? Often to the Caribbean to be what's called seasoned, which is where they try to strip your humanity from you deliberately, make you forget your identity, your culture, your heritage, your language, right? So this was a system that was set up, right? And then shipped to the US, often different parts of South America, what we now know as South America, Latin America, to be enslaved. And you're disconnected from everything that you knew. I can't even imagine that. If someone was just like blindfold me and ship me forcibly to a place I had never been, and to think that that is who I descend from, still telling their stories. So there must be something so strong, so rooted, that that has been able to be preserved throughout seasoning, throughout the trauma that we experienced, which I'm going to be talking more about. When it comes to nervous system healing, we haven't even began to touch on that. How are nervous systems impacted by the transatlantic slave trade? It goes so deep. Get to the comments. Yeah, I thought that was so beautiful. Yes. Let me think of the name. I know it was called ancestral bone mapping. Let me see if I can find a link to it real quick, because it was so enlightening. And again, we think about bones are left after our bodies, right, do what they do, as bodies do when we pass away. But our bones are left. And so to think about our bones being a way to map what our ancestors experienced, I thought that was such a fascinating concept. So yeah, let me link that in the chat real quick if you'd like to check it out. And her name is Iya Afo. She is a trauma healer. And that's the link to it if y'all like to check that out. I believe, yes, the recording is still available. Sarabi Makeda, hello. I will always honor my ancestral ways. They had the keys to many realms of wisdom. Absolutely. Thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing that. Yes. Yeah. Always. Right? It's not an option. So many instances of internalized oppression that I have seen, even surprisingly, right, within African American studies. It's just kind of like, what? Yes. The shame that still exists, right, as I was in those classes, the courses, there's still a level of shame in trying to assimilate. As we're studying about the linkages to history and how they show up in the present, it's disturbing. Given the right how Black Studies was founded as an academic discipline, and to see a lot of the times what it looks like now, it's like, ooh, I don't. That's a whole other topic. But the level of internalized oppression is very real. Yeah. Thank you for this. I appreciate this. Such great content. We are epigenetically bound to our ancestors. Thank you. Yes. The field of epigenetics, right? So we are not disconnected because we literally carry DNA from thousands of years. And so the linkages that we're told that are in the past, they're broken. No, they're not. That's a lie. And it can feel so disconnected because part of the way that oppression works is it tries to disconnect us from not just our collective past, our individual past, which is why it can be difficult to even revisit childhood. As I talk about childhood trauma, because they try to cut us off at 18, because they want control over everything, right? Our bodies, our minds, how we perceive ourselves. And even with childhood healing from childhood trauma, right? The more that we lean into our authenticity, who we came here to be, that's our source of power. And so anything that they try to steer you away from, know that there's power there. And part of healing and liberation is to actually go the other way. So they're trying to steer me away from this thing, right? My childhood, my ancestors, my lineage, where I come from. They're trying to steer me away from that and just asking why. Know that there's power there. And go the opposite way. So part of my healing journey has really been doing that. Go the opposite way. Hey, Marissa. Yes, I'm late, but I love the idea of this conversation based on the title alone. Thank you. Glad to be here for this convo with you ladies. You too. Thank you so much for joining. Yes. Yes, yes. Quianna says, yes, we're present in the bodies of our grandmothers. Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Yep. Epigenetics plays a big role in what we hold internally. Yep. Yep. And again, we haven't even begun to touch on epigenetics and enslavement. The level of damage to our cells that was done. And so I feel like that's my life's work. I feel like that's my life's work to bridge, right, understanding of nervous system healing, childhood trauma healing, and connect it to what we experienced during enslavement. Because we're still very much being dehumanized. And so things even like, even in the field of mental health, not even being taught that we, in the same way that white people are often, right, that we have parts of our brains that respond a different way, that we have hormones that activate, right, stress responses, and how that has impacted our bodies, and how that is passed down from generation to generation. And we see things like shorter life expectancies. That doesn't come out of nowhere. And no, that hasn't always been the case, which is often taught to us. Right? Well, this is just what, no, it's not. No, it's not. It's very real, right? Something that I'm sitting with as I approach the age that my dad passed away very early. Understanding like the linkages between generational stress and how that impacts our bodies and shortens our life expectancies. This is not something that has always been the case. This is due to the trauma of enslavement. Yeah. Ibo says, packed like sardines. This wasn't a cruise ship experience. Thank you. Thank you for this. No, it wasn't. And I have seen things pop up, like even questioning the transatlantic slave trade, right, which is disturbing to me. Trying to, I think it comes from shame a lot, right? But again, that shame doesn't rest with my ancestors or me. That shame rests with enslavers, right? People who brought it upon themselves to see, oh, who saw it as an opportunity to brutalize people, to harm people, to strip people from their lands, and they didn't feel any type of way about it. That's where the shame lies. And so I think the efforts that we're seeing to try to erase the history of the transatlantic slave trade has to be pushed back against, has to be called out, right? Why are you furthering the whitewashing of history. Mm, yeah. Thank you for this. Yes, Black Magic, Dr. Joy DeGroy. Yes, Post Traumatic Slave Syndrome is a great reference book. I do have that on my bookshelf. Yes. And so, yes, if you'd like to join us in Patreon, I think this is going to be my book club space. Let me get the link to it real quick. Yes. And so I think that'll be one of the books that we read together. Again, I'm not sure what timeline this is on because I'm just starting, like, after the experience of a traumatic work environment. And something I hope to have a guest on to talk about. Like, it really damages our brain in such a way. So I'm just now at the space where I'm able to really read for real again. And I love reading. But that experience did something to my brain that was really, really traumatizing. And so I hope to have someone on who has an understanding about how trauma impacts the brain to really get into the effects of this, right? These traumatic work environments, as I talk about, they're not small, the impacts of them, right? Which is why I'm like focused on providing all the resources that I can, spaces to, for more of us to be able to exit because they're damaging our brains, right? And this is damaging us generationally. Trauma doesn't just stay with us and what we experience, it's passed on to future generations. Um, and I think that we have been taught and socialized to view trauma, right? Microaggressions as just par for the course in workplaces. No, it's really damaging our psyches, our beings. It's impacting our spirits. And so that has to be called out, right? We're not here to be traumatized, but we've also been taught that we are. There's a lot of layers to that. Yeah. Oh, thank you for this. Let me write this down. Appreciate all the book recommendations. You're welcome. Yes. 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 Questioning what about, yes, the transatlantic slave trade. Oh, yes, yes. Questioning the transatlantic slave trade. I have seen that. So the question, did it even really happen? Right? I've seen that pop up for Black people too. A narrative that I before had just seen, right, with people trying to question, poke holes into what we experienced from outside, and that message has now come inside. And it's disturbing to me, right? Again, having a rooting in history. And I think it's so important to connect that to what we're experiencing now. To see people try to question, did this even happen? It's That's a whole other topic. That's a whole, yeah. But it's disturbing. Yes, thank you for this. Yeah. Dr. Yes, Gabor Mate, yes, I believe that's how you pronounce his name, has done research on trauma on the brain. Yes, I'm actually taking, so there's a summit, a somatic healing summit that I'm watching the replays to right now. Um, and I believe he's one of the speakers. Yes. And it's so important to be able to connect, right, what our brains are experiencing to the trauma that we have endured, survived throughout centuries, because those are not disconnected. I appreciate you sharing that. Yeah. Yes, thank you. Yes, there is a whole movement of Black folks who are denying that the transatlantic slave trade ever happened. Yes. 100%. Yep. There's another book that I would recommend entitled, thank y'all, Imagination and Manifesto. Thank you, Imagination. One quote from it is, replace the thought of AI as artificial intelligence with ancestral intelligence. Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, every Black woman needs to read Killing the Black Body, Race, Reproduction, and the Meaning of Liberty by Dorothy Roberts. Thank you. I'm writing this down. Yeah, there are whew, so many things to read, to absorb, especially during these times where they're trying to steal our history. Um, oof, it's heavy. It's heavy. And so, getting back to my notes, right? Imagination itself is resistance. Because when you can imagine something beyond oppression, you can start to create pathways towards it. Imagination itself is resistance, because when you can imagine something beyond oppression, you can start to create pathways towards it. If they tell us that oppression is the only thing that we experience on earth, that anyone before us has ever experienced has only been oppression, that's only our frame of reference. That's what our imagination is then limited to. And that's why it's so important to resist, to understand that that is very deliberate attempts to limit our imagination and our understanding of who we descend from, of what has occurred, of the truth. Afrofuturism teaches us a few key things, right? So, reclaiming time, we honor the past, we live in the now, and we also shape the future. We honor the past, we live in the now, and we also shape the future. So the future is not just for other people to shape. Based on their values and quotations, right? Based on the way that they want things to operate. Part of my own journey in uprooting oppression has been understanding how the hierarchy functions, where we are told based on our place on this fake hierarchy, where our value lies, right? Who we look to for authority to tell us which way to go. All of this exists within this hierarchy that is formed by our oppressors. And so, in your mind, as a form of individual liberation, dismantling that hierarchy within and viewing everyone on the same playing field, right? So, your opinion is your opinion, but it's not above mine. I've been taught to view it that way because of the hierarchy. And also, I can resist that understanding. I can replace it with one that actually I view myself as an equal player. And so these things are very deeply, deeply rooted. Technology for liberation, right? Afrofuturism, from digital spaces to innovation rooted in community care. My community, Black women freelancers, sharing resources, knowledge, ways to enter the digital economy. And I haven't really put those together until now, but yeah, It's important because there's so much innovation happening, and Black women especially deserve to be at the forefront, because we are often in these work environments that are draining our spirits, that are causing us to doubt our brilliance, that are impacting our self-worth. Something I'll be coming out with later this year, self-worth recovery. How to recover your belief in yourself, that you know what you're talking about, that you have skills. Rebuilding your self-confidence after experiencing oppression is not an easy feat. Right? So ancestral wisdom, futuristic vision, weaving together memory and possibility, knowing our ancestors dreamed us into existence, and we will also dream future generations into liberation. And again, being in social work spaces with Indigenous social workers in the US, there is often a perspective of 7 generations, which is the worldview. How your decisions will impact someone 7 generations into the future. And also calling on the wisdom and information of people 7 generations before you. And I think learning that just kind of opened my eyes to things that I feel like I've been cut off from, being disconnected from our ancestral lands, I think has the impact of that, right? Because we are of the earth and we're disconnected from where we descend from. And I think that often makes our experience of oppression very unique. Right? And so we see this at work in art, fiction, creators reshaping what is possible. Get to the comments. We are. We are. Thank you for this. We are. Yes. Yeah. That's why people's, yes, skepticism bothers me. Their imaginations have been hijacked. Yes, it fuels my own imaginative work. Yes. Thank you for this. Yeah. Skepticism. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because it's often coming off as like the thoughts and beliefs of our oppressors, right? That's what it often feels like when I hear people's skepticism. And the impact of internalized oppression. Oof. That could be a whole other topic of discussion. And as you said, their imaginations have been hijacked. Yeah. And so this is kind of like we're at war over our imaginations. Like it's really, and again, the things that they try to keep us from hold power. And so just think of how much power your imagination holds, that they're trying to keep us from it. Right? By defunding art programs, anything that keeps us in our imaginations and able to envision a world different from the one that we're in, they want to cut that off. Especially now. It's on overdrive. It's real. Yeah. Okay. Right. And so the core principles, I feel like this was all over the place, but this is the first time. I appreciate y'all being here. If you're here live, if you're watching the replay, thank you so much. This is an experimental live episode of my podcast on freedom. But core principles of Afrofuturism: reclaiming time, past trauma, right? What we're experiencing in the present, and also viewing ourselves having the agency to create the future that we envision, not putting that in someone else's hands because we've been socialized within this hierarchy, right? To view other people, right? Tell me what I'm supposed to do. Tell me what I'm supposed to, where I'm supposed to go, what I'm supposed to value. We've been taught, we've been socialized and conditioned to view ourselves within a hierarchy, right? That we don't have agency over where we want to go, where we want to move our own bodies, what we want our days to look like. And so reclaiming our time, our energy, Afrofuturism can help us do that using ancestral memory to envision that future. This is not all there ever will be because this is not all there ever was. Right? Our history did not start at enslavement. There's thousands of years of ancestral memory that literally live within our bones, within our DNA, with the things that we do that we probably are not even recognizing often, right? That are connected to our lineages, to our ancestors, to who, from where we descend, using our imagination as political resistance. All of these things Afrofuturism can help us do. And so I did want to, let me see if this will load. I did want to play a video as we wind down. We're also having Wi-Fi issues. Okay, I think it's loaded. Let me see if this plays. And I did want to link this too. There is like a virtual, come on. There's a virtual type, it feels like a field trip exhibit. If you want to check out the Afrofuturism exhibit at the National Museum of African American History and Culture, it's on their website. So I'll link that right here. I'm hoping my internet. Come on, come on. Yeah, this is the exhibit. If you want to tour it virtually on their website, please feel free to do so. And again, part of this, right, is an anger of seeing the exhibits that they're trying to take out from this museum. They're trying to whitewash, they're trying to make it seem like slavery never even happened. And then that thought is being seeded within. And it just creates this entire level of confusion and chaos, which is the intention. So let me see if I can play. Oh no, y'all can't hear it. Oh no. Oh. Okay, I'm gonna try to share it a different way. Thank y'all for bearing with me.
Other Star Trek, and seeing Lieutenant Uhura, whose uniform is here in the show. And I've spoken to many people about what an impact Nichelle Nichols, who played the role, created. People really were responded to her and her use of Swahili, her use of science, and her symbolism on television. We also have astronauts who are inspired by her. We have Mae Jemison, the first Black woman in space, who has directly talked about the way that she inspired her. There's something about the ways that these representations further our sense of travel. It's a really powerful show. Is it doesn't just talk about the present or science fiction. It goes beyond that. It thinks about the ways that the enslaved imagine new worlds. It thinks about the ways that Benjamin Banneker in his almanac pictured the stars and brought them home, if you will. And to have that legacy of Afrofuturism, to engage it throughout W.E.B. Du Bois's fantasy writings like Dark Water, or to think about the ways that Octavia Butler's typewriter provides a testament. And of course, Octavia Butler wrote about the future, but she also wrote about the ways that African Americans and kindred go back in time. And that kind of conflict and that question around the past and the ways it can be repurposed for the present is part of Afrofuturism's legacy. It's a rich legacy that's still going on, and having everything in the show from Du Bois's 1900 exposition designs that think about the future, they're so futuristic and modern looking, to the ways that the Black Panther suit embodies the hopes and dreams for many people. There's other special items in the show, including Trayvon Martin's flight suit from Space Camp. The power of seeing his flight suit up close really has us think about the dreams that Trayvon Martin had and the dreams that we all lost that day that he was killed. I think one of the richest ways we see Afrofuturism is through music. We have everything from Sun Ra in the show to Parliament Funkadelic to Nona Hendrix. And having those costumes is really special to see them up close and see the ways that they embodied almost a kind of homemade, handmade, futuristic sense. That's really powerful. It's performative, but it's also personal. And Afrofuturism bonds those things together, whether it's listening to Outkast or thinking about the ways that Alice Coltrane embodies the cosmos. How do you capture that sense of outer space? I think that's really important and part of Afrofuturism's legacy. Well, people find really a visual, stunning show when they enter the space. They'll be transported both into the past and into the future. Seeing all the costumes and uniforms from The Wiz to Parliament Funkadelic to thinking about the music that people made that imagined better and different worlds. If you can't imagine a new world, you can't imagine a better one. And Afrofuturism is very much thinking about that.
So yes, y'all, please check out the virtual exhibit on their website, which I linked in the chat as well as the description section. But yes, I appreciate y'all being here. Again, I didn't know how this was gonna go, but I feel like I have so many book recommendations, first of all, so that's a win. Thank you for sharing all these books with me, resources. Um, as we lean into Afrofuturism as a way to see ourselves, right, and envision ourselves outside of what we're currently in, I think it's so important to reawaken our imaginations. Also, to realize that the systems that we're living in day to day, they're trying to steal our imaginations. They're trying to tell us that this is all there ever was. And so we just have to be satisfied with this, right? With living in oppressive systems. I think reminding ourselves that there was a whole history, thousands of years old, before this, before enslavement ever occurred, that we can pull from to map out what our future is going to look like and our role in it. And so, yes, I hope that this was beneficial. This podcast, virtual live podcast on Afrofuturism in times of chaos, the power of imagining liberated Black futures. I appreciate you being here. If you're watching the replay, thank you so much. And yeah, let me just go through the comments one time. Thank you to Quianna for the inspiration. Please subscribe to her channel, Level Up Single Mom. Thank you, Alicia. Inspiring as always. Yes, I love that. I love that. Yeah. And yes, ancestral bone mapping, if you are interested in learning more about that, based off the event that I attended by Iya Afo, who is a trauma healer, incorporating ancestral practices into understanding things like epigenetics. Here's the link to check that recording out right here. And I'll also link it in the description after this video too. Thank you. It was inspiring and affirming. Okay. I appreciate that. I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you. This is beautiful. Thank you for allowing us to take part. Thank you. Thank you for being here as always. Okay, y'all. I do have, let's see, tomorrow, 7 p.m. Eastern, I'll be talking with Megan Torres about unlearning self-sacrifice. She has a new book out called Survival Pending Revolution. So we'll be talking about that. And then on Thursday, I'll be speaking to Dr. Kamani at 9 p.m. Eastern on emergency money plans. If you are part of the 300,000 plus at this point, right, of Black women who have been pushed out of the workforce and we're being targeted, it has to be said, we are being deliberately, intentionally targeted during these times. Please check out that conversation on Thursday, 9 p.m. Eastern, for more information on how to get your money plan together. There's a lot of fear. Fear fuels these systems that we're in. And so the more that we can share resources with each other, remind each other, right, who we come from, our incredible lineages, and all the things that still very much exist, even though we're told they're in the past, they're destroyed. No, they're not, because we're still here talking about it in 2025. And so that is proof, right? Through all the things that we talked about today, through the transatlantic slave trade, seasoning, enslavement, throughout centuries, this information has survived. And I think it's our responsibility really now at this time when we see what's happening to bring more awareness to it. Thank you. Thank you, Drell's Healing Garden Journey. Thank you for always holding this sacred space, Marissa. You're welcome. Thank you for being here. Thanks. This was great. Thank you for being here, Amina. Yes. Period. Period. Yes. Ivo Jackson, great show. So proud of you, young women. Thank you. Thank you so much. This means so much. And so, yes, on that note, y'all, I hope to do something like this in the future. This was different. As someone who doesn't like to talk that much, I'll be honest, having a podcast style episode. But yeah, this was healing. This was healing. And I have so much information to take forward as I think of future content. So I appreciate you being here. And yeah, y'all, until next time, thank you, y'all. Bye.